Good morning. Welcome to Rise Up. I'm Alia Halal.
Welcome to Rise Up. I'm Irfan Alamgir.
And this is Hadil Al-Khouli, our special guest for the Human Rights Report that we do every day. Assalamu alaikum, Hadil.
Wa alaikum assalam wa barakatuh. How are you, Ali? How are you, Dr.
Wa alaikum assalam, Hadil. Great to have you on again. And what do you have for us this morning?
Turkey again.
So,
we were just talking about Iran the other day. Unfortunately, in Turkey, we have 3 Iranian members of the faith who are detained at the moment in a detention center at risk of deportation back to Iran. Again, for no other reason other than being members of this faith, for proclaiming their faith, for putting up a poster of the Ahmadi religion of peace and light. And since then, since their arrest, they were, of course, the security forces, they went to their homes. Their lawyers were not allowed. At the beginning, they wouldn't even allow the lawyers to come in. They tried to already from that first initial point when the investigation was happening to try and make them sign deportation papers that the members refused because they didn't know what was in there. The language, obviously, they didn't understand. So, and when the lawyer finally was able to come in, they switched the paper.
Whoa.
So it shows you from the beginning there was this vicious intention to target them specifically and to deport them. And it's very important to stress this point to show that there was no law that was broken, there was no crime that they have committed, and the authorities, the police forces at that point, they specifically targeted them with the intention of getting rid of them and deporting them back to Iran, of course, which would be a death sentence.
That's catastrophic.
There's no other way of putting it. So it's horrendous. I mean, what if these members didn't actually have access to a lawyer? What if, any other human being who was just arrested and they interrogate them and they didn't have the understanding to say, no, I'm not going to sign this paper. You would have, and it just shows how vulnerable people are, how the whole system of a country is failing people, and how if you have no support, if you have no awareness, if you don't have this, what the Ansar have to stand up for their rights, you could be on a plane, flown back to Iran where you'll be executed. It's horrible if you think about it. And thank God, I mean, these 3 members, they were members of the 104. And they now got this experience because in Edirne, in the deportation center there, the whole time, as the court was still looking into the question of deportation in the detention center every other day, you will be deported anyway. Just sign the paper. We are going to cut water from you. We're going to cut electricity from you. All types of tactics, absolute abuse of human rights, were utilized to pressure them to sign deportation papers and, throw them back and make them go back to Iran. And these 3 members, having already, so they already went through this once. They already were detained for half a year with no crime. So imagine, 104 people were beaten, thrown in detention center, threatened with deportation, went through all types of mental, physical, even sexual abuse. And after half a year, the judiciary said, actually, they're innocent. They weren't, they didn't do anything wrong. So they are released. They try to build their lives back again in Turkey, follow the law, apply for asylum, try to have a normal life again and try to recover from the abuse. And again, they're in their homes. Again, the Turkish authorities comes to their door, comes to their home, drag them out and say, how dare you be a member of this faith? We're going to deport you again. It's absolutely horrific.
They have no shame for the fact that they made such a big mistake on an international level, and it was known by the United Nations. It was known by all these NGOs and human rights organizations that spoke up against these oppressions the persecution that was taking place in Adarna, and they do it again in a new form. It's so outrageous.
Especially that the UN statement that came out said very clearly, do not deport members of the Ahmadi religion of peace and light because of the well-founded fear of persecution in their countries of origin. That was really the content of the statement.
Like literally it's black and white, and still they just repeat this offense as if they have nothing to be ashamed of.
Absolutely. There's no difference. There's no difference between the case of the 104 and the case here in terms of what the rules are and what the human rights standards are. You know, these are asylum seekers who applied for asylum, who applied for international protection. And it is proven that Iran would persecute them. So to decide to deport them, and we appeal against the deportation, and the appeal gets rejected. Now we're appealing again. To even be in that process again, it says only one thing. It says that this is specifically targeted against members of the Ahmadi religion of peace and light. Turkey is not a safe country for them, and the state is specifically targeting them.
Yeah, it's horrible. And, hearing you describe these events over and over again in like these different countries, it just, I think people need to wake up to the fact that these things are really happening on the ground, and they need to have some kind of frame of reference. Because in the West, we've never encountered anything like this. But people who are in the Middle East, they live in a completely different, warped reality. And it really brings to mind I don't know if you're familiar with the book of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, where he wrote about the Gulag Archipelago, where he talks about this exact kind of a setup for dissidents within Russia, where they would just be taken into the Evin prison of that time, which was in Siberia, and forced to work in these labor camps and things like this. And as you're speaking, Hadil, I think it's really, really important for us to really act in the right way. We really have to get into the shoes of these people and recognize the kind of suffering they go through and the kind of injustice they're subjected to. Where the lawyer is manipulating and everything is run by the state. It's a horrible condition to live in. And to highlight the strife and suffering of these people is absolutely essential if we're going to help them in the right way. And the conditions in Iran, I mean, this is the Gulag archipelago of this day and age.
Absolutely.
It's horrendous. And for the Turkish authorities to show such lack of compassion, I would strongly urge their government to make these books part of the curriculum in their schools, because it seems as though no one cares until the gun then turns through karma onto them and they have to endure the same thing. And this is something that's going to happen. As you treat the fugitive, you too shall be treated. This is the law of karma, and it will play out. So we have to recognize that one day we might be in a similar position and we might be knocking desperately at the door. But if we turned a blind eye and we did not recognize the suffering of another human being, then maybe we will go through the same thing in our life.
And they don't have, as you said, the ability to even fight for themselves. And if these brothers who are going through this had been alone, as many are, and they didn't have the backing of yourself and your team, if they didn't know any better, if they hadn't been educated on how to stand up for their rights, and if they didn't have Abu Sadiq, most of all, behind them and actually helping them retain their human dignity and teaching them that they are human beings, even if the whole world is telling them they're not, right? That's all they hear, that they're not worthy of being treated humanely. And now Abu Sadiq is actually telling them, no, you have a voice, you are a human being, and we will fight for you, and you will fight for you. And he's telling them that, and this is what we're seeing from them now. But imagine, as you said, they didn't have all that. What would be their destiny, their fate? It would be so dark. And it really makes me shudder to think how many really do go through that, and they just wiped away. Their names are just erased from human history. We don't even know what happens.
Absolutely. And just this thought, think how many people on a daily basis in Turkey go through this. And like I said, have no access to lawyers and have no support, have no backing, have no platform, have no voice. And and are now disappeared. And absolutely, I agree with you, Alia. This is what we've seen. You know, that Abbas Sadiq gave them this power in themselves, and they've also seen that it worked. I think this is the thing. They trusted in Abbas Sadiq, and they've seen the results.
Yes.
And now they know that this is the way to do it. Because when the case of the 104 happened, they trusted, and they've seen how that when they followed and they believed and they fought for their rights, the world stood with them and fought with them, and they were released. And that in itself is an incredible story. And when I saw how they reacted this time in the police station, I knew that was because what they went through, and how Abbas Sadiq alayhi salam had that experience with them. So I knew that that was because they had a leader like Abbas Sadiq alayhi salam, and they won't give up, and we won't give up for sure.
A leader like Abbas Sadiq, who refuses to let 25 years pass before it's recognized as one of those atrocities, looking back in history, like happens so often with so many of these past tragedies. He's not going to allow that to happen, and that's why he is the living imam. Absolutely. You know, not a retrospective imam who, once the atrocity happens, then there's a plaque and a memorial and a service that's run in honor of these people. But we can't allow this to happen, and it's not going to happen. And we have a track record to prove that we have God with us.
Absolutely.
So long live Abbas Sadiq.
Long live Abbas Sadiq, alhamdulillah, and labbaik. Thank you, Hadil. And keep us updated on any further information on what happens with them. I'm sure you and your team are working on a campaign for the sake of these dear brothers of ours.
Absolutely.
And we're looking forward to some good news very soon, inshallah.
Inshallah.
So now we're going to go to a quick break, as we do after our human rights report. We'll be right back with Brother Ardian Al-Mahdi, the messenger to America, with some of his explanations on the Goal of the Wise. So stay tuned for that.